number of plates to do what's commonly called the French Cleat. And I wanted to show some of the ideas. Some of them I picked up, some of them I made up. And let me show you a few ideas I had that help with organizing a fairly small tool space. So the idea with the French Cleat system is to take strips of wood, I use 3/4 plywood, and to bevel it like that. You can attach it to the wall. My house is older, so it's got scrapes and brackets and marks all over it. But just add some simple strips to the wall that have a 45-degree angle to it like that. Then you take the mirror image of that board, and then when you place the two together, here, let me scoot it to the edge. You can see it sits in there very intimately, and it's surprisingly strong. So this is one example. I use these little 90-degree go-bys to make sure smaller projects are square, and just took a couple of simple scrap 2x4 blocks, glued it, and just put some screws through the back, attached it to the plywood. Simple way to throw your go-bys up there, stay up out of the way, they don't get distorted or crushed underneath some other project. And it's a simple little thing you can do just with some scrap to keep it up out of the way and organized. Another simple project I had some spare dowel rods. Again, I just had some scrap plywood. I added my strip to the back. I glued it. You can see I added a couple of screws to it. And then these are the dowel rods right here, and just a couple of screws and glue, more than enough weight. And you can add something like that. Real simple rack, actually holds up a ton of weight. And the nice thing about this sort of setup is if you don't like it there, you can move it over wherever it fits. And you can organize things however you want. Another simple idea, I just had these were actually a hook, but I just wanted them to be straight, and honestly, they were just scrap hooks with threaded ends. So I spaced them out a little bit, put them in on a piece of plywood with a mounting. Same thing, where it'll fit up there. It's surprisingly stable, doesn't move a bit. So you can see my little flattened out hooks, and I use them. You can see why I mount them this way, but I use them to put my clamps, or at least some of my clamps. So you can see I spaced them out that way. And I have several, so you can see they can be several deep. It's more than strong enough to hold up an entire set of clamps. And keeps them up off the bench as well. I'll just another simple one, just a couple of scraps of wood. You can see I put one screw, a couple here. All the multiple screw holes are just because it's an old scrap piece of wood that I'm just recycling. You can see I glued it. I don't do a lot of finishing, but you can see I took a sander and went around the edges just so there's no sharp edges to catch anybody. And this, again, simple little thing to get the little vacuum cleaner that I use to keep sawdust at a minimum. Now this one I probably spent at least a little bit of time on. I just took a scrap piece of plywood. Again, you can see it's just plywood. You can see the laminations. And I just used my table saw and just cut and then moved it over ever so slightly each time to make a little bit wider slot than the blade. Added a little scrap of wood, mounted it to a little plate. You can see the back side, no worry about it looking nice and pretty. Just a couple of screws, glued it, rounded the edges with a sander, as you can see, just so it wouldn't have any splinters for anyone. And again, you can see surprisingly strong, really handy for mounting squares. Just various types. It just makes for a handy way to mount simple little, that one's probably a little too big to put up there, but you get the idea. I'm a little machinist square, speed square, and so on. But again, keeps them up out of the way, keeps them off the bench, because if you get weight on it, it can of course distort your square. So it's a nice way to keep them from getting all banged up and bent. And this is the biggest thing that I actually have, at least at this time. And it's a little bit on the heavy side, just showing the underside of it. Couple of little legs, just a screw, but it's actually, you can't really see them, but it's got some little finish nails. I just put it in there to keep it from being able to rotate. I usually just glue everything. You can see everything's glued, so it's not likely to come apart. And this is it mounted on the wall. You can see I put the little leg to extend down to the next one. So since these are all evenly spaced, it can be mounted anywhere up there. It makes a nice shelf on the top, but then you have the underside, which is really handy. And so I've got over the years, I've collected quite a few cordless drills. I have my corded ones in a drawer, but you can see this keeps them up here and handy, out of the way. And I keep the charger right beneath it. The idea is to save some space, get them up to where they're handy, because these are the sort of tools you grab all the time and use them very frequently. Another idea, I have a couple of these Craftsman chargers for a couple of my cordless tools. This is just scrap, real thin scrap wood, I think it's a 2x2 or maybe a 2x4 that I ripped a piece off. Small piece of plywood, some other smaller blocks to hold the charger in place. And then if you can see, I notched out a couple of areas to hold it in, and then added the bracket like so. On this one, you can see I added a second one, because when you mount it in the area where it fits, this helps keep it out flat so it's not flopping around everywhere. And I spaced this so that it could fit anywhere on the wall. And here's another simple one. I had this bracket, which I just mounted using a couple of bolts. I made a little wood pattern, just trying to be creative, made a little curve to it. Mounted it with the 45, a little piece so that it wouldn't be able to rotate. And when I put it up on the wall, you can see it fits very well. The little block keeps it from rotating. Now, one thing I noticed with this one, because I hang some of my longer clamps on it, is that it does rotate a little up and down if the clamp snags. And even though it's not likely to fall off, I was a little nervous about it. So I just took a little scrap of wood, cut it very accurately, put a screw in it for a handle, a little spider web there, and I put it so I can slide it in like that and pull it out. And there's no way for it to raise up and slide out anymore. The block keeps it from coming out. So you can't take it off with that in the way. As you can see, it's locked in on the top because the bottom can no longer slide upwards. You want to move it, you have to take the little block out. It's kind of like a little mechanical key almost that holds it where it can't go anywhere. I use it for mounting my longer clamps. But as you can see, again, handy way to hang them up on the wall, get them out of the way. And although it's not completely organized yet, but you can get the idea, I went ahead and threw them all up on the wall. And the nice thing is you can move them around if you decide this isn't the way you like them. But you can see, have a variety of drills and drivers, just a couple of hammers, dead soft mallet, regular old claw hammer, place for a couple of chargers. I have a couple of other chargers. I've got this really ancient one that still works that I just mounted on, made a little bracket for it to work. That works with some of these older drills, but they're still working, and when they stop working, I'll get rid of it. Little vacuum cleaner I was talking about, the little 90-degree, they're not really brackets, but to check your 90 clamps. Variety of squares. It's not even all of them, but it's a few to show you the idea. And then some of my longer clamps for doing bigger projects. You get the idea. Threw a couple of short ones up there, long ones. It all works. Show you, I set some of them up together so you can see. Got the batteries, the various things for the French cleat like I was talking about. Still have a lot of space in between, and then all my clamps, several of my squares, and so on. But just to get some idea of what you can do with a fairly small space, it works really well.